Tank Museum has been doing an awful lot of innovative work over the last number of years, certainly since the pandemic. Very much a leader in the sector when it comes to innovation, when it comes to e-commerce as well. And Nick today is going to be talking about computer games, video games, and explaining why video games are good for the Tank Museum and potentially very good for the rest of us as well. Over to you, Nick.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you very much, Gordon. They don't come much better than that. Can I just check everyone can hear me okay? Because it's kind of weird because, yeah, I can just hear the rest of the hall. So thank you for that. Video games. It's said they make kids lazy, antisocial, and even violent. But in this presentation, I'm going to show how video games can be a powerful tool for cultural engagement and one that I think we can no longer afford to ignore. Nick Wyness, Head of Marketing at the Tank Museum, and using our decade-long partnership with one video game producer as a case study, I'll share the 6 key benefits we've enjoyed to hopefully challenge your perceptions on the value that video games can offer modern heritage organizations. Now, whilst I'm focusing this on video games, this is all really just about the importance of a museum making itself relevant and visible in modern popular culture. We all know mass media has the power to create cultural reference points, and that these can make a theme or a location relevant through the impact of fame and social proof. Probably my favorite example of this is how the book and then the film Da Vinci Code made Rosslyn Chapel just outside of Edinburgh world famous. Within a couple of years, I'm told that footfall leapt from about 30k a year to 180k per year, showing that popular culture has a marketing power that we as attractions marketers could never hope to generate ourselves. So that's one example of the impact that a Hollywood association can have on a heritage attraction. And I feel that there is this lingering romantic association with Hollywood, which means that heritage organizations are likely to get excited when a movie producer calls up. There are lights, there are cameras, there are stars. It's glamorous. But I'm pretty sure a video game producer doesn't generally get the same reception, because to many, video games are considered to be culturally less significant. But that's just not true anymore. The global box office is worth 30 billion US dollars, compared with the video game industry, which is worth 200 billion. That's almost 7 times more. Video games now dominate media consumption, shaping global entertainment, popular culture, and socialization. And plenty of them have grown their own loyal fan communities, spawning fan fiction, fan art, and discussions in active social media forums. It used to be that movies spun off video games, but now video games are spinning off movies. But somehow we still consider movies more important and culturally influential. But here's an example that I hope might change your mind. So what is an FV4005? Exactly. This is the FV4005, and it was the subject of a heritage restoration project that was driven entirely by the gaming community and internet culture. So not the forces that traditionally demonstrate significance in a museum setting, and it shows how gaming can inspire audiences to appreciate heritage in new ways, and how it can motivate gaming communities to engage in heritage preservation. The FV4005 is the only surviving prototype of a dead-end post-war project. It's not a vehicle that played a historically significant role in the story of the tank. It's not like the Shermans, the Tigers, and the Churchills of World War II that our visitors traditionally want to see. And as such, it wasn't a vehicle that was anywhere near the priority list for restoration and conservation. And here it is being stored outside the Tank Museum as a gate guard, where it was pretty much forgotten and slowly rusting away. But in July 2020, so about 5 years ago, it was added to the video game World of Tanks. And that has completely changed its meaning as a museum piece. And I'll come back to this and exactly what it's meant for us in a few minutes. But first, what is World of Tanks? Well, it was released in 2010, and it's a free-to-play historical tank combat simulator. It's a PEGI rating of 12, as even though it features tank-on-tank combat, the destruction is purely mechanical. It doesn't feature people, so there's no human casualties or gore or anything like that in it. You play on a team with other tanks, and the team's objective is to knock out all the other tanks in the other team. Now, I've played it plenty of times. Research. And it's genuinely good fun. And actually, this screen grab really doesn't do it justice. The quality's not very good, so apologies for that. And that brings us to the first benefit of the Tank Museum's partnership with World of Tanks. To get good at this game, you must educate yourself in tank tactics, teamwork, and using terrain to your advantage. You can choose from many different tanks from between the 1920s and the 1950s, and to do it well, you must understand the strengths and weaknesses of the tank you're playing in and those you're playing against. That means that getting a feel for weapon range, cross-country performance, ammunition type, and so on are all really important. And these are all things that are important components of the story the Tank Museum tells as we seek to educate our audiences in the history of armored warfare. But we've never found a way to do this as effectively or to as many people as this one video game has. World of Tanks offers an interactive learning experience of the sort we as museum professionals know to be massively effective, but can't afford to develop ourselves. Now, we could have found all sorts of reasons for not engaging with this video game and its players, but instead, the Tank Museum saw how it could learn and benefit from collaborating with an organization that was succeeding in achieving a big part of our charitable mission in a way that we never could. So, any successful museum corporate partnership is anchored in those areas where the two parties' objectives overlap. And in this case, we're looking to do similar things, but they're coming at it from a completely different direction and doing it from completely different reasons. But that's what makes collaboration possible, because we both have things of value that we can trade to help us achieve our distinct goals. To offer the best possible gaming experience, the producers of World of Tanks want it to be as historically accurate as possible. And that means the publishers have become our customers for expert consultation on the vehicle models, performance stats, and for access to our archives to obtain images and technical drawings like these ones here. And whilst this is one of the ways in which the partnership is generating us revenue, we also see providing these services as a means by which we can fulfill our charitable objectives at scale. We're educating the production company and sharing archival material so that they in turn can provide the most authentic portrayal of the subject matter for their players. And because of that, World of Tanks' association with the Tank Museum lends it an enhanced credibility in their market and therefore something of a competitive advantage. And the Tank Museum gains credibility and prominence within the gaming community through our association with them. Because by positioning ourselves as an institution that's relevant to gamers, we earn their respect and trust by occupying a space that museums don't generally step into. World of Tanks' popularity has created a new audience for our subject, igniting an enthusiasm among fans for a deeper level of immersion and knowledge, and a desire to see the real thing. And it's done so on a scale that we could never have achieved alone. And this has led the fans to us in the same way that a generation of Airfix and Tamiya model kit customers found their way to us in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. In 2011, World of Tanks had 5 million registered players, and 10 years later, it had 160 million. So our partnership has given us the opportunity to introduce ourselves and connect with this massive global audience. And it's an audience, of course, that has signaled specifically an interest in this highly niche subject area. Now, my most enduring strategy for the Tank Museum is a very simple one. It's just to be more famous. And this is a really good example of what I mean, because fame breeds trust. Not just because more people will have heard of us, but because the people that they trust will have heard of us too. If you're famous, people come to you. And if you're not, your only option is to go and buy that attention. Now, even if it was possible for us to buy access to such a warm pool of tank enthusiast prospects, I'm certain that we could never have actually afforded it anyway. So to us, this is absolutely priceless. But what's particularly interesting about this new audience is exactly who they are. We know that video games tend to appeal to younger audiences and that museums, well, they generally don't. World of Tanks has a high proportion of young males in its player base, and these are among the least likely demographic of all to engage in heritage and culture. But here the video game is proving to be a gateway to an appreciation of the real thing and the museum experience. This is Tiger 131. It happens to be our most famous exhibit, and you can see it here as it's featured in World of Tanks. And down in the bottom, there is the real thing. It's unique. Now, you can buy this tank in the game, and when you do, a share comes to the Tank Museum as a donation. So wherever you are around the world, World of Tanks allows you to engage with and become familiar with the Tank Museum's collection. And in addition, you can support the preservation of our heritage with other in-game purchases. Just think about the potential of that model for a moment. Alongside this, World of Tanks' impressive graphic engine can bring vehicles that no longer exist back to life. In one exhibition, we used gaming technology to display an extinct tank in an augmented reality experience that visitors could access on their mobile phones. In our YouTube videos, we've used in-game footage to reconstruct historical tank battles, bringing otherwise unillustratable events and stories to life in a far more engaging way and with excellent results. And thanks to World of Tanks' commitment to history, military history in particular, we've collaborated on numerous event live streams that have brought our historical and educational content to hundreds of thousands of gamers watching on Twitch. Now, for World of Tanks, these things allow them to demonstrate the value they place on the preservation of heritage and the value of the museum experience and the importance of historical education. In exchange, we get to show off in front of an audience. And because they've been successful in their industry, they can financially support us as well. So our relationship with World of Tanks began as a financial sponsorship arrangement for our annual fundraising event, TankFest. And this continues today, although it's now much broader. And World of Tanks is by far our most significant private sector donor now. They've sponsored exhibitions, YouTube content, and they've funded loans and live streams, and alongside this, they've actively promoted museum funding initiatives to their own player community, leading to even greater levels of financial support. World of Tanks funded the Tank Museum's Education Centre, and this gaming zone, you can see here, has contributed to an increase in dwell time among your younger audience members and their families. World of Tanks' support for us and several other tank museums around the world shows their social responsibility on the one hand, whilst further differentiating themselves from their competitors. So those are the ways in which we're benefiting. But what's the actual impact? Well, simply put, the compound impact of all this is that the Tank Museum is much, much, much better off than it would have been otherwise. Our footfall is greater, our online supporter base is greater, because we've worked to maximize the full potential of this partnership. We've become more famous by being more relevant in popular culture and exposing ourselves to the positive upside potential that this brings. But, of course, popular culture isn't really as popular as it used to be. I remember when everybody watched Top of the Pops and everybody knew what was number one. Media fragmentation today means that everyone is in reality hardly anyone at all. And popular culture only really extends as far as we can see ourselves. Tanks and tank video games probably aren't going to be everyone's cup of tea. And can I get a show of hands? Is anyone consider themselves a World of Tanks player? Has anyone ever played this game? 1, 2, 3, there's a few, fantastic. There's still a very low percentage. So yet again, we're talking about the importance of niches. Even 160 million players is less than 2% of the world's population. It's certainly not everyone, but it's enough, and it's enough for us to move the dial. So that's probably why the vast majority of you have never heard of FV 4005 before, but that's why it's symbolic of the power video games can have on our culture. I'm going to end with an example of how all the benefits I've just listed hang together in a really exciting way. Firstly, if World of Tanks hadn't existed and they hadn't added FV 4005 to the game, very few people would have known it existed at all, much less cared about its fate. It's got a pretty unusual appearance, and the story behind it is quite quirky as well. And these things have combined to give this tank something of a cult status among the game's community of fan. It became a meme in the tank, in the tank community and the video game community, spawning fan art like this, and it also earned a unique nickname among the community as well. Now, this is a very highbrow audience, so I'm not going to say what it is out loud, but I will give you a clue. Sorry. So suddenly, our rather sorry-looking FV 4005 was famous within that community, and it meant something to the players. And they couldn't understand why the Tank Museum wasn't looking after this unique and significant vehicle properly. And what this shows is that video games have the power to totally reframe the significance of a museum artifact as a result of a gaming experience rather than a purely historical one. And that internet culture can empower previously unrepresented voices to redefine historical significance from those new perspectives. And that alone, to me, anyway, is really interesting. But it doesn't end there. In 2023, we were approached by the engineering YouTuber, Mr. Hughes. He's a big World of Tanks fan and a big admirer of the FV 4005. And he asked us if he would let him take his favorite tank away to restore to running order. All he wanted was permission to record the work for his YouTube channel and to have his cost covered, which we estimated to be about 40K. Well, we said, well, only if we can raise the money. And our friends at World of Tanks said that they contribute half of whatever we raised. So we put it out to our supporters on social media, and the reaction and the enthusiasm from the community was absolutely incredible. We raised £20,000 in 24 hours without even really trying. And we had to switch off the fundraiser when we hit 40K a few days later. Mr. Hughes completed the work in around 7 months, and at TankFest 2024, the FV 4005 was run as the star attraction before a 24,000 strong sellout crowd. Now, none of these things would have happened if World of Tanks hadn't existed and if we hadn't built a mutually beneficial partnership with them. So again, this is an example of how heritage can be made relevant to younger audiences whose voices are often excluded from heritage prioritization debates, and how such partnerships can reshape the way audiences interact with and financially support heritage preservation. So to wind things up, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation about how a movie production company might get a very different reception to a video game production company if they called a museum or a heritage attraction. And the thing is, we weren't the first military museum a World of Tanks wanted to collaborate with when they entered the UK market. But we were the ones that took the call, and I'm extremely glad that we did. And that does leave me wondering how many opportunities the sector may have already passed up because of an undervaluation of the potential that video games can offer them. Now, we can say plenty of bad things about video games, and there isn't time to go into the many internal and external challenges this relationship has presented over the years. But for all that, it turns out that video games really are good for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Amazing presentation, mind-blowing stuff that you're showing there. We have time for some questions, which I'm going to kick off with, Nick, if you don't mind. So
sorry.
You put your headset in. Yeah. We've got time for questions. I'm going to kick off with question number one, though, which is potentially an unfair question to ask. How much of what you have said is unique to the Tank Museum? Considering there is this huge following for tanks, is the product itself, your subject matter, does it lend itself more to this than, say, a civic museum would have?
It depends on the subject matter. And it depends on the video game, I guess. And no question, a lot is about being in the right place at the right time, but a big place is that is making sure you're taking the opportunity that comes your way. I mean, there's a range of different video games, and there are a few other museums who are kind of dipping into the video game community to help kind of, get their stories out there. And a really good example of that would be the Royal Armories and Jonathan's videos on YouTube about the weapons that are used in video games. And so I appreciate these are both kind of military museums as well, but there's other examples of video games creating historical environments that gamers can explore. So I think it probably would extend beyond just, I mean, this example on the screen right now is Minecraft, for example, and that's not directly a military video game, but somebody's taken the time to rebuild a tank that's in our actual collection in Minecraft, and that's, to me, pretty interesting.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Questions from the floor, right at the front.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. If it's okay with you, could you explain us, coming from the content creation, myself, and having objective to support the preservation of patrimony, what is the fair exchange financially or between content creators and a museum or owners of collection?
Sorry, I'm not sure I quite understand.
Basically, like I'm myself as a content creator, I'm partnering with castles to help preserving, and we are bringing content, but we are still at the beginning of the process, and we want to create a fair exchange, a fair share. What type of deal, if you find it's fair for you as a owners of collection from content creators? How does that work?
So working with content creators is, it's something that we do quite a lot of, but it depends very much on the content creator, the side of their audience, and therefore what we stand to gain from that. Every arrangement is slightly different, and it depends on the audience that they're appealing to and what they're intending to do specifically. So yeah, there's lots of variables, William. Maybe we could chat afterwards and we can kind of look into that in a bit more detail, because I'm sure your case might be very different to there isn't really a specific general one, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was fantastic. I wondered if you had any advice for museums who are looking to get in touch with specific either video game developers or publishers. I work for a Paralympic museum, and there's an upcoming disability sport wheelchair basketball game, and it would be interesting to see if there was an opportunity. But the publisher, Nintendo, it's they're a big multinational corporation. How does a small museum start that process?
Yeah, and that's actually a very, very good question. I have to say it's one I don't have an answer to, because we were fortunate in that they came to us. But I'm a big fan of LinkedIn stalking and being extremely vociferous in that. Sorry, I can't help.
Am I right in saying is that your collaboration with the World of Tanks has made you look at another tank you have in your collection in a different manner, and then that it's opened up a different historical perspective? I'm thinking of I'm not exactly what it's called. There's a experimental tank, maybe from the 1920s. Is that correct?
Yes. The example I gave of FE 4005 about how that tank appeared in the game and then suddenly had a new meaning and a new relevance to those gamers, that's not actually the first time that happened. And actually there's a number of different examples of these really sort of niche experimental vehicles that maybe they look a bit weird or they've got a bit of a weird backstory, have suddenly become really, really popular amongst these crowds. And there's several of them. The one you're referring to might be the TOG 2. We recently did it. Yeah, it was a vehicle that we hadn't done a huge amount of research on. No one, the story that we've been telling about it wasn't 100% accurate, and we kind of got called out on it because it had this big fan community, and they were basically saying, what the Tank Museum is saying about this vehicle is wrong, and fair dues to them. So, and that's another interesting impact, isn't it, about World of Tanks? It's kind of caused almost crowdsourced research to be done on our items in our collection. And again, this vehicle, I remember, I've worked at the Tank Museum a long time. When I first started working there, it was just this tank that was in a very, very quiet corner of the museum, and literally no one was interested whatsoever. In subsequent years, the children's play area got built next to it, and it's huge. It's the heaviest tank in our museum by a considerable margin, and that means it's very, very difficult to move. But now it's become very popular. People want to come and see it. They don't like the fact it's where it is now, and I'm hoping that in an upcoming exhibition, that vehicle is going to be moved into a much more prominent position. And again, purely because of the impact that vehicle has had on the gaming community. Not because of its historical significance directly, but purely because it's famous in a video game.
Thank you very much. Any final questions? Yes?
Nick, I think it's great what you guys have done in terms of the revenue generation that you've done for many years, and then the link with this. Just interested to know if you've got any evidence of how many people have then ended up actually visiting off the back of a partnership like this as well to get that physical visit.
Yeah, it's very difficult to put an exact figure on it, because you can almost put activity like this kind of brand work in the PR category, which means it's very, very difficult to measure. But just because you can't measure it doesn't mean it's not important. We know that since they were sponsoring our Tankfest event, that's gone from a 10,000 total footfall event to a 24,000 footfall. But there's lots of other things been going on at the same time. I certainly think that a partnership like this has been really good for building the Tank Museum's brand. And for us, of course, that's not just about visitor footfall anymore. That's about our online audiences and sort of how we're engaging with those online audiences and raising funds from those online audiences. And I think the World of Tanks thing in particular has helped us reach those audiences in more far-flung places. Any
final questions? Or are we all going off to play World of Tanks together? Is that the plan? Great. Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Can we give a big round of applause?
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you've not been to the Tank Museum, it is worth the journey to Bovington to see it. It's a truly wonderful museum, and the work that Nick and the team are doing at the Tank Museum is incredible. Follow Nick if you don't follow him just now. Do it because he always is coming up with great new ideas.